Radharani, the three. So they would sit and they would get the transcript, like the little audio cassette, micro cassette of Srila Prabhupada's dictating the books, the Bhaktivedanta purports. So they would sit around in a room and listen, and then they would conceive of what paintings they would paint for that section of the Bhagavatam or Prabhupada's writings. And then Bharadraj had the assignment of making the initial drawing, the conceptual thing. Jadharani came and filled it in, and Muralidhar came and did all the finished work. The jewels and all the little details. They had like an assembly line. So we were not supposed to go and disturb the artist, but I always did. Not always, but I regularly went upstairs, and they were sitting there painting, and while they're painting, I would watch the painting manifest, and they were describing the pastime. Since then, I've had this very strong liking for visuals, because, it says a picture speaks 1,000 words, but some of the pictures are really, it helps me at least, feel the message, not just speak the message by the visual that's presented. So I like doing that. It takes time to put all this together. I didn't put this particular presentation together, but it takes some time. But it helps. Ready? So look at this visual. What do you see on the screen? Probably you're too far away and you can't see it. There's a cloud in the sky, and behind the cloud in the sky, there's the sun peeping through the cloud in the sky. It's a visual to help understand the metaphor that Bhaktivinoda Thakur is using, that the brightness, the power, illumination of the sun can be blocked from our experience of the sun by clouds. The clouds of anarthas, or of fog. So this is the metaphor that's in this chapter. There's the image. Our people online may wonder, what's that? We're in somebody's backyard and the plane just flew over. That's what that is. And it's not Logan Airport, it's little private planes, it sounds like. Okay, so this is the image for the message. The message is, shining like the sun, the holy name destroys the darkness of ignorance. However, fog and clouds again and again cover the sun of the holy name. The individual soul's ignorance and anarthas. What's anartha? Artha is something wanted, and anartha is something unwanted. Something in the heart that not nice. That's what an anartha is. The individual soul's ignorance and anarthas become like fog and clouds. When the sun of the holy name rises in the sky of the heart, fog and clouds again cover it. So there's the sky, and there's the sky of the heart. It's a metaphor. It's a metaphor within a metaphor. So here's a description of the fog of ignorance. Because of, you can't see the screen so well. That's a boat. It's a boat of the holy name, and Lord Chaitanya is on that boat of the holy name and his associates. Down here is an ocean where people are drowning in the ocean, different unpleasant circumstances. And that around the boat is the holy name that dissipates the fog of ignorance. When the soul does not understand the spiritual nature of the holy name, the fog of ignorance brings darkness. A soul who does not know that Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead will worship many demigods. In this way, he is lost wandering on the path of karma. Karma was discussed in the first chapter. By demigod worship, one can become elevated to the heavenly, receive benefits in this plane, and attain the heavenly higher realms in the next plane, but it's all temporary. That's the path of karma. You do, and you get a reaction or result. That's the path of karma. A soul who does not understand his own spiritual identity as a soul takes shelter of Maya. He is always in ignorance. Next, Lord Krishna and the individual souls are master and servants, respectively, and the world of Maya is dull, lifeless, and worthless. When a soul does not know these truths, the shadow of ignorance, like the sun, and there's the ignorance or the mist or fog of ignorance, there's a shadow cast upon us, falls on his head. Now you can't see so well because the screen is far away, but at the very top picture, like at 12 o'clock up there, that's a living entity walking away from Krishna. It's part of a bigger picture that we saw earlier. It's a painting. To his left, where he's saying no to, that's Krishna in the spiritual world and his associates doing their activities together in different rasas. Where he's going is into the cloud of the material energy. That's what the image is indicating. Okay, so starting at 12 o'clock and then down over there to 3 o'clock. Separation from being a servant of Krishna. If we leave that position, that's the 12 o'clock image, down there around 2:30, delusion about oneself. If you're facing the sun, you see light. If you turn your face away from the sun, you see shadow. So when you see shadow, you don't see yourself. You see shadow. You see a shadowy idea of who you are. One is deluded about one's true self, the spiritual identity. And then once that happens, we get a material body, gross and subtle, and we become influenced by the illusory energy, the three modes of nature in particular. And with the three modes of material nature, we're pushed and pulled by desire and hate. It's right from Bhagavad Gita. We discussed this already in earlier chapters. And then over there about, 9 o'clock or 9:30, there's a envy of Krishna. The person on this kind of like stick figure person on the left, that's God, and one's accusing God. Envy. I had an order, and you weren't my order supplier. You didn't fulfill my requisition slip. You got a big warehouse. That's not nice. So having an attitude towards that which is the source of everything is part of the consequence of material existence. Here's a little cartoon, just for humor's sake. There's a fellow in his easy chair with his bead bag on his hand, chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, changing the channel on the TV. What was the 11th offense? The 11th offense is inattention while chanting. He's not being very attentive to his chanting. He's being attentive to the TV set. So the idea here is when chanting, try to be very focused and don't multi-process or multitask while you're chanting. Just try to be absorbed. So that's chanting, but it's not carefully guarding against offense. So this is counteracted. Tulya, you asked in the first class, why all this information about Krishna Tattva? And here's the answer. Namabhasa is counteracted by Sambandha Tattva. Sambandha? I don't speak Sanskrit or Hindi, but I know what Sambandha means in both. It's relationship. Relationship. So, Sambandha Tattva is to understand the relationship of everything with the source of everything. And having proper understanding of Sambandha is one of the essential ingredients for counteracting Namabhasa. Why is there such a thing, Namabhasa? Answer. As long as the jiva is not firmly established in the knowledge of Sambandha Tattva, or the correct understanding of the relationship between God, his energies, and the jiva, who is also his energy, he will continue to chant in the Namabhasa stage. So we have to have a basic foundation in what's what in order to connect with Krishna, or to chant without Namabhasa stage. And so how to progress beyond the Namabhasa stage? Well, there's many things, but here's just a simple principle. When the serious chanter takes full shelter of a bona fide spiritual master, he learns how to expertly perform devotional service and thus disperse the mist and clouds in his heart. Now this is Bhaktivinoda's writing, and he's writing it in such a way that this is what Haridas is speaking, Haridas Thakur, the Acharya for the Holy Name. But it's Bhaktivinoda teaching about chanting. Once the cloud and mist are removed, the sun of the Holy Name shines brilliantly once more and bestows the devotee with love of Godhead. So now we're going to see a nice chart. And it's got some interesting graphics. So we're going to start at there's a line that kind of goes in a nearly a full circle. Up at the top, relationship. This is Sambandha. Sambandha Tattva, Sambandha Gyan. The bona fide spiritual master gives the disciple Sambandha Gyan. The chanting of the holy name is the indication or abhideya of this relationship. The indication, abhideya means acting within the relationship. Abhideya means acting within the relationship. There's 3 parts of Vedanta Sutra, there's 3 parts of the Vedic knowledge. The Sambandha part, the abhideya part, acting in that relationship, and then the fruit of acting in that relationship. What's the goal? The outcome? What's the purpose of life? That's described in the Vedas, described in Vedanta Sutra, being described in this one slide. Starts with Sambandha, then comes the process or abhideya. The spiritual master enthuses the disciple to take up the abhideya or chanting. The sun of the holy name then shines stronger and evaporates the mist and clouds. Abhideya helps the process or acting in that relationship, helps to remove that which is covering the relationship. This is working through the Abhas stage to the Shuddha stage. Then comes the result or the goal. Chanting at this stage becomes an indispensable need. Prayojana. Prayojana leads the desire to pure love of Godhead, at which point he, the chanter, experiences ecstasy in every moment of chanting. Now, you can't tell so well, so I'm going to point it out to you. If you watch that line at the bottom, and then it goes up, and then it goes across, it starts to turn red, and it goes around. It's a nice graphic. I didn't do this. Someone else did it. Then it shows what comes at the bottom in yellow letters. Until he is solidly grounded upon proper Sambandha Gyan understanding, his chanting will be polluted with anarthas. This is Namabhasa. So back again to Atulya's question, chapter number 1. We're in chapter 3. He's just expressing the same thing again a little more definitively. So it sounds like Namabhasa is a bad thing, but now comes a slide saying it's a really good thing. How's that? At the bottom, Namabhasa is better than all the Vedas and all holy places. Namabhasa is the best of all auspicious deeds. Why is that? How do you say that? It brings many auspicious benefits and awards. Great piety. Just in chanting itself, even if the guy sitting there changing the TV channel, it's powerful within the name. Just like the sun is powerful, the sun coming through the clouds is also powerful. When it's night, it doesn't have the same power. I mean, we don't experience it in the same way. But the name, even in the Abha stages, it awards benefits and it awards piety. Shubha. It destroys sins. It has the power to award liberation. It purifies the mud of materialism. It cures all disease. These are taking the words of Haridas Thakur and just putting them in bullet points here. All fears flee from Namabhasa. A person who chants Namabhasa is safe from all calamities. Yakshas, Rakshasas, Bhutas, and Pretas. I had to look this up. What's a Preta? How is a Preta different than a Bhuta? Ghosts, we know what ghosts are. It's a subtle body without a gross body, and there's a soul inside saying, I want to enjoy, and he's like disturbed because he doesn't have a body through which to try fulfill desires. So ghosts try to inhabit bodies so they can act through that body to fulfill their desires. So a ghostly haunted person has got another voice going on, and that's the ghost who's haunting him or her. That's a ghost or a Bhuta. So what's a Preta? Not really clear. Someone can educate me what Pretas are. That would be nice. It's a word that's used as a phantom or a goblin. We heard this nice story. I'm just changing gears a little bit to keep everybody's attention. There's a very nice story, or a section of Padma Purana that describes, there's a whole big section of Padma Purana that describes the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam. The Bhagavat Mahatmya section. And it tells a nice story. The history of it's a long story, but someone, a Brahmin, a Smarta Brahmin in a place along the Tungabhadra River in South India, he was married to Dunduli, a nice wife, but she was a little bit grumpy. Kind of complained a lot, and she did her services nicely, but she was kind of a critical personality, and he just put up with it. But after some time, there was no son, so he decided he would go to the forest and undergo austerities, and maybe through austerities he would somehow be able to have a son. When he was in the forest, A sannyasi came by. He told his story to the sannyasi. He said, "You look miserable. What's going on?" And he said, "I don't have a son." He said, "Let me check your horoscope." He checked his horoscope. He said, "Sure enough, you're not going to have sons for 7 lifetimes." "Oh, I got to have a son. I got to have a son. I got to have a son." So the sannyasi told him a story from the Bhagavad Purana about King Chitraketu. The King Chitraketu story is narrated in the 6th canto of the Bhagavatam. And I'm not going to narrate that story. But he had many, too many queens. But he couldn't accept, "I can't have a son." It's not meant to be. Just accept it. Not meant to be. He couldn't accept it. So he told them the story. And so Angira Muni came along and did a yajna so he could have a son that would bring him misery. He said, "Your name." Here's his name before he's even born, before he's even conceived. His name is going to be Harsha Shoka. Happiness, misery. That's his name. "Oh, that's okay. Better to have a son that isn't so obedient, and I'll have a son." Okay. So a son was born, and the other co-wives that didn't have a son, they were really envious. And some of those co-wives got together, and they conspired to kill the son. And they poisoned him in the middle of the night. So when Angira came to see his son in the morning, he found him dead, and he screamed, and his wife screamed, and lo and behold, Narada Muni and Angira Muni showed up right at the right time and said all the right things and helped them understand the intensity of desiring material happiness when it's not meant to be. So the sannyasi told this Brahmin, "Don't be like King Chitraketu. I want a son. You're a sannyasi. You have some mystic power. Do something. Please do something." So he said, "All right. Here's a mango. Give this mango to your wife. She will conceive a son. But she has to undergo fasting for a whole year." When he got back and told his wife, "Here's the mango, and you got to fast for a whole year," it was, "What? Mangoes are nice, but fasting for a year, I don't know if I can do that." And she knew her husband was expecting the son. So she had a conversation with her sister. And her sister said, "You know what? I'm pregnant. Just tell him you ate the mango. When the child is delivered, I'll give you my son." She said, "Great idea." So within a while, a few months, a child was born. "Oh, I ate the mango, and here's the child." So it's her sister's child, but he was really, really bad. Like wicked bad. Wicked, wicked, wicked bad. I hope you don't mind a Puranic story. A little different than the screen you can't see because it's too far away. So, but it's about pretas. So they wanted to test out the power of the mango. They gave the mango to a cow. Within 3 months, the cow gave birth to a human being that had ears that looked like a cow. Gokarna was that son's name. You know the story? Because there's a city called Gokarna. That's how the city got its name, Gokarna. Cow ears. And he was a Brahmin. You know the story? No. You know Gokarna. You know the place, Gokarna. Karnataka, yes, exactly. So, Gokarna and his brother, like half-brother, they grew up together. They were the same age. One was really bad. and one was really good. He's a Brahmin. He did all the Brahmin things really, really, really wonderfully. And after some time, he was so bad that his father, the Brahmin that thought it was his own son, was actually his wife's sister's son. He left home, went to the forest, and tried to get liberation. And his mother, the mother became so frustrated she drowned herself in a well. Left the little fellow to his own devices, and he was so wicked, he began hanging out with prostitutes. So they had a whole house, and he had not just one, but multiple prostitutes hanging out in the house. And because he was born in a Brahmin family, he didn't know how to do anything to earn livelihood, so he became a gangster. And the king's constables came to know about what he was doing, so they arrested him, tied him up, and burned him. He died. I forget his name, but he became a preta. That's where the preta story comes in. So he was hanging out with bhutas, but he wasn't a bhuta, he was a preta. And he was disturbing his stepbrother, Gokarna. Get me out of this sinful reaction. So he went, Gokarna, I'll tell the rest of the story. He went to perform, what's the place where you go to do Shraddha? Gaya. He went to Gaya. Didn't work. He did all the rituals and it didn't work. So he decided to ask some sadhus what to do. Sadhu said, worship the sun god. So he worshipped the sun god. This is a fast forward. The sun god appeared and said, to want to relieve him of sins and reactions to sins, recite Srimad Bhagavatam from beginning to end. He'll be freed. So Gokarna did that. He was reciting the Bhagavatam. And his stepbrother, forget his name, starts with a D. No, not Dundubi. Dunduli or something like that. So he hid himself, because he was a preta, he hid himself inside a bamboo. There was a bamboo wall. So he hid himself inside one of the bamboos, and each day one of the notches of bamboos broke, and at the end of the seventh day, he ascended into the sky and thanked Gokarna for freeing me from sinful reaction. So Gokarna said, before you leave, could you just answer one question? Because Vaikuntha Vimana descended to take him at Vaikuntha. You were such a bad person, you got relieved of all those sins. How come all these other people that were seated here didn't get liberation? And you got liberation. He said, I was listening really intently. So the group said, hey, let's do it again, only we'll listen more intently this time. And that's in the Padma Purana. So the place got the name Gokarna for that reason. And Dunduli, or whatever his name is, Dundukari. Okay. Dundukari had become a preta. So that's what this is. Yakshas, Rakshasas, Bhutas, Pretas, evil planets, and Anarthas all flee from Namabhasa. So that was the story about a Bhagavatam recitation. This is now chanting, even in this less than perfect stage. By Namabhasa, the souls fallen to hell are delivered. From Namabhasa, all past karma flees. So now we have two things, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam regularly and chanting, even if it's not perfect chanting, regularly. Very powerful. There on the screen you see some beads with the holy name written on the side. Namabhasa is greater than the results of studying all the Vedas, of visiting every pilgrimage place, or performing every possible altruistic and pious work. Now these are just statements extracted from the Vedas that are glorifying the chanting of the holy name. The 4 goals offered in the Vedas, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, are made freely available by Namabhasa chanting. Sounds like a good program. It is endowed with unimaginable power to reclaim any living entity. It bestows unlimited joy and elevates even the derelicts to a very exalted stage of realization. Namabhasa offers eternal residence in the spiritual abode of Vaikuntha, especially in Kali Yuga. This is the declaration of Scripture. Now, what we heard in the previous chapter is one thing it doesn't do. What doesn't it do? It doesn't bestow love. Or the stage beyond liberation is loving eternal service and being situated in the mood of loving eternal service. So it's a neutrality kind of liberation. So now we're going to go into some more detail. Well, there are 4 kinds. This is right from 6th canto Srimad Bhagavatam. Same place we spoke about. You know, the King Chitraketu story is 6th canto. Another very celebrated section of the 6th canto is the Ajamila story. Ajamila story? Yes? No? Not sure. No. Ajamila. I'll pause and go to the 6th canto is being narrated by Narada to Yudhisthira at the time of the Rajasuya sacrifice. In that Rajasuya sacrifice, Shishupal lost his head. The speaking part of his body was so offensive, Bhima wanted to smash him. He was offending Krishna. Krishna said no. 100 times he offended Krishna. Krishna drew his Sudarshan chakra and separated the speaking part from the rest of his body. He was liberated. His soul went in the air. Everybody saw this brilliant light and then merged into Krishna's body. So at the end of the Rajasuya Yajna, Yudhisthira said to Narada, how did that happen? He was a bad guy. He was mean and insulting and harsh, and he got liberation. Great souls for lifetimes, they undergo austerities and this and that, and they don't get liberation. This guy got liberation. How'd that happen? In short, just see the power of the holy name. Because he was calling the holy name in scorn and derision. So much, his whole life. Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. He got liberation. He got purified because of calling the name not purely, but in that one of the 4 kinds of abhas. So that's contempt. In Sanskrit, the word is hela namabhasa. Contempt. There's joking, parihasya. Like, you know, when we go chanting in the public, and sometimes people go, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. I have a nice story about that. I have several. It's a nice story, but there isn't time. It's purifying. It'll take about 5 minutes to tell the story. It's a really good story. I'll tell the story. Once upon a time, we had a temple in an Italian neighborhood, residential neighborhood in Brooklyn. Heavy Italian neighborhood. I mean, if we left our cars parked on the street, they'd be burned into cinders the next morning. That was telling us, don't park your car on the street. Etc. You know, they would throw rocks through the window if we forgot to, like, you know, close the window. during kirtan. They didn't throw Molotov cocktails, they just threw rocks. We put up, anyway, so it was like a tough neighborhood. And the temple it's a double brownstone building on a corner, and over on that corner, going out the front door, and over in that corner was a schoolyard, a grade school, like little kids. And when we would come back for lunch from Harinam, we were chanting along with the street Mridanga cartels, Haribol, Haribol. The kids would come because it was their recess, their lunch recess. They'd come out to the fence, because there's a fence that was 10 feet tall, and they would mock us. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, ah. So, fast forward, maybe 15 years later, I was passing through the Detroit airport. It was at time I was traveling, and then was Northwest was still operating, and so it was a transit lounge thing. And coming down the hall was a group of Northwest employees, whatever you call those people, staff, and they were really loud and laughing and carrying on. And when they got to where, because I was waiting for the departure, at the departure gate, this one fellow stopped and looked like he saw a ghost. He turned pale. All the other people, he said, "You keep going, I'll catch up to you." He stood in front of me and looked at me like I had holes in my head or something. I said, "What's wrong?" And he said, "Are you a Hare Krishna?" And I said, "Yeah, look at me." He went, "Oh, no." I said, "What's that about?" He said, "Well, when I was young, I lived in Brooklyn. And, we used to make fun of the Hare Krishna people in the schoolyard when they came back and playing their cymbals and tambourines and banging on drums." I said, "I remember, because I lived in the temple." He said, "Oh, no." We were so bad. We threw rocks through your windows, and we burned your cars. But you were always good to people. You fed people. You took care of people. And you're always very kind. I always felt bad about that. But that melody, it never left my mind. Hare Krishna. And just today, as we were coming off of work, I started singing, and you know what? All my employee friends, they started laughing at me like we used to laugh at you. I thought, this is karma, man. Now I see you. And I was thinking, wow, just a little kid making fun, joking, laughing, but it stayed with him. It went in. Not everyone has the same experience, but there's one person for sure. And this is 15 some years later, 20 years later, I don't know, whatever it was. And it's still in his mind, and he's singing the melody to his friends. He said, "You're really kind, and you're doing lots of good work, and please keep it up. Don't be intimidated by people making fun of you, because I know you're good people. You do good work." So I was thinking, this is a message from Super Soul saying, continue. And he said, "I got to catch my friends. Please forgive me for all the..." And off he went. So that's an example of what's on the screen here. It's hard to read it, but Hela Namabhasa. No, excuse me, Parihasa, joking. Then there's another. I was telling the Ajamila story. So Ajamila had the good fortune of becoming fallen also. He was born in a Brahmin family, really good in every way possible. One day, when gathering articles for the yajna, he was in the forest, gathering wood and flowers and this and that, and he saw a Sudra drunk and a prostitute going at it. And he'd never seen anything like that before, and his mind went there. He couldn't get her off his mind. He went back and did all his Brahminical mantras and yagyas and this and that, and his mind was on the prostitute. So he yielded to his mind, and he started going to see the prostitute. And then he moved the prostitute into his house. And then his wife moved out of the house. And he was with this prostitute and lived with the prostitute, and same thing Dundukari did. He didn't have any way to maintain himself, so he became a criminal. And he lived his life like that. But he named his son, one of his sons, Narayana. Now you know the story? The Narayana. So he's on his deathbed, and the Yamadutas are coming. And he sees them. Yikes. Fearful looking beings. So what did he do? He called out the name of his son because he was really attached to his son. Narayana. And as soon as he called in that unintended manner, he wasn't calling Lord Narayan, he was calling his son who was attached to, the agents of Narayan, the Vishnu Dutas, came and told the Yamadutas, stop. What? Who stops death? Who are you guys? You look very nice, but why are you doing this? And then there's a whole discussion. And the end of the discussion is because he was calling the name. That's the completion of his prayashchitta, or atonement. There's all those sinful things he did washed away. From Sanketa Namabhasa. Namabhasa. Freed from sins. He didn't, achieve perfection, but he was freed from sins, so that the Yamadutas went away. They went to Yamaraj and said, what's going on? Who are those people? And there's a whole discussion with Yamaraj. Yamaraj ends up saying, someone's chanting the name, leave them alone. Even if they've been sinful, if they're chanting the name, leave them alone. We heard this in the discussion just today. One lady lost her mother. So she said when she was growing up, it was a practice that when someone's close to death, the relatives would gather around and chant Rama's name very loudly, so that they would achieve purification from hearing the name. The faith in the name is not new. Very, very traditional and very, very factual. So those are three types. Unintentional, intending something else, but it's calling the name. Joking, derision, and stobha is mocking. So here's a little cartoon. On the upper left, there's a nurse, somebody's in their deathbed, and he's thinking, oh my God, Narayan, here comes the nurse. Sanketa. Or over here, there's a Muslim word, I guess, haram. It means deaths, right? Is that what it means? Danger or death or something like that? Anyway, Sanketa. We discussed this. Joking, derision, you Hare Krishnas again, or inattention, or with contempt, Hela Namabhasa. Okay, that was enough storytelling. Now we're going back to our text. Shraddha is that kind of Abbas chanting. Remember Abbas using these metaphors that's in this chapter. It's the clouds or fog. Kind of fog is like low-hanging clouds, but clouds and the fog of ignorance and the clouds of offense, or anarthas that arise from offense. But supposing one has that condition, They're not in full knowledge, and there are still some offenses, some unwanted things in the heart. Are you barred from chanting? If you're with faith, you have faith, the name will help me overcome this situation. That's really good. If one chants with faith, but also with anarthas, his chanting is called Shraddha Namabhasa. By chanting Namabhasa with contempt, even with contempt, that's not with faith, with contempt, still one can destroy sins and attain liberation. So chanting with faith, Namabhasa chanting of the holy name, destroys those unwanted things in the heart, the anarthas in the heart, and eventually, slowly but eventually, gives prema, or pure love for Krishna. Moving along. However, by chanting with Namabhasa, one achieves everything except prema, or pure love. By Namabhasa, one comes to the stage of pure chanting, but you have an obstacle. What's the obstacle? The impure things in the heart. It blocks the power of the sun. When the anarthas have fled, pure chanting becomes manifest, and pure love for Lord Krishna becomes manifest. Namabhasa has no power to give pure love directly. Only proper chanting, following the rules of chanting, give pure love. Okay, take a deep breath, because we're going to get into some more details. Of this Namabhasa, there's the image of the cloud in the sky blocking the sun. There's partial blocking. It's got a name, Swarupa Abhas. Partial infiltration of the full brilliance. Namabhasa caused by the cloud-like coverings of ignorance is called Chaya Namabhasa, or the faint, shadowy name Chaya. Chaya, shadow or reflection. Yeah? No, that's not the same. Shadow. The way to the shadowy name is opened by Chaya Namabhasa, or the faint shadow with faith. So, it's like what we see in the sky right now. Of course, the sun is setting, but there's clouds in the sky, so the full brightness of the sun is not experienced, but there's clouds blocking. But supposing I have faith that there's sun on the other side of that cloud. There's something in my heart that's unwanted, but I have faith in that which is pure. And I'm trying to take shelter of that which is pure to overcome the unwanted thing in my heart. I have that faith. So that's good. Chaya Namabhasa is symptomatic of ignorance or weakness of heart. Weakness of heart. Weakness of heart. It's a term that's used in Bhagavad Gita, weakness of heart. Hridaya Dorbalyam. Krishna says to Arjun, Arjun, you're speaking in a way that's not appropriate for one who knows the progressive values of life, and Aryan doesn't speak like this. How has this weakness of heart overcome you? Hridaya Dorbalya. Bala means strength, and Dorbala means weakness. Weakness of heart. So any one of us may be in a situation where there's some faith, but it's not so strong. And so we're not experiencing the full effect of our spiritual practices. We're doing because we have faith, but it's not so strong. So the full effect isn't subjectively what we experience. We had a question, you asked the question earlier today, we have this teaching that says the name and the person, Krishna, are not different. That was your question, right? Was that your question? No, it was somebody else. Was it your question? Yes. Okay. So here's the teaching. there's a bowl in front of me, and in the bowl there's some apples and oranges and bananas. So I can say apple, 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 apple. And the object is not the same as the sound. I can say chair, and I can sit in the chair, but I can't sit in the sound chair. The sound, the name, and the object named are different for material things. But for spiritual things, the name and the object named, or that which is denoted by the name, are the same. That's spiritual subject matters. The sound and the object are the same. That's why mantra works. That's why the Vedas work. That everything is transmitted through sound. That's a nice idea. Supposing I have faith in that idea, but I don't have realization of that idea. So I'll continue chanting, but it's a whole other thing when you actually have the experience that the object and the sound vibration are the same. So that's an elevated stage of spiritual development. You can actually experience the spiritual world through sound. You can actually experience Krishna's presence, Krishna's form, Krishna's qualities, Krishna's pastimes through sound. We discussed that in the class earlier today. So, one of the things blocking it is this ignorance. And that ignorance is dissipated by light. Darkness is dissipated by light, by sound. So continuing to chant in the Namabhasa stage eventually removes that covering. That's the first of the two kinds of Namabhasa. Then there's a even weaker kind of Namabhasa. You see the image on the screen on the left? There's the sun setting, and it's being reflected on a lake. Maybe you can see a little duck out in the middle of the lake. So there's the reflection of the sun and the sun reflection on the lake. That's called pratibimba abhas. This means the reflection of a distorted image of an object, such as sunlight distorted when reflecting on the surface of the water. The distortion is the wind blows and the surface of the water moves. So you don't even get a clear reflection of the sun. It's just a distorted reflection of the sun on the lake. Such a distorted, broken reflection can never result in a complete perception of the original source of light. Similarly, pratibimba namabhasa chanting increases one's offense. You're looking at the thing that's not the real thing, and it's a distorted image of the real thing. You think that's the real thing. So there are persons that chant with that idea. It's just like a means to get something. It's one of the offenses against the holy name is to think that the chanting is like a ritual. In the Vedas, there's karma kanda rituals. If you do bad stuff, you do some kind of atonement for bad stuff. And some people think it's that kind of thing. It's an atonement for bad stuff. You chant so you can get clean. And then but it's not really Krishna. It's just a means to get something. That's a distorted reflection. So how do you get on the other side of that one? And even the other one. This is the next section. Spiritual master has power. By his own power, the soul cannot know the truth. Only when the holy name gives the gift of knowledge does the soul understand the truth. That's what we discussed this afternoon. There is a stage where the soul can perceive the name and Krishna are non-different. But to get there, there's power invested in the chanter by the person who gives the mantra, the spiritual master. A fortunate person whose chanting is Chaya Namabhasa, after a few days, very easily attains pure love for the holy name. A few days. Pretty quick. A few years. And so I'll try to go quickly now, because I've spent a lot of time telling stories from the Puranas. sadhu sange karipuna shravana kirtana. If a Mayavadi rejects the desire for sense pleasures and impersonal liberation and instead chants the holy name, then he will become a servant of Lord Krishna. Even an offender can be delivered. In the association of devotees, he will again and again hear and chant Lord Krishna's glories. Then he will attain true knowledge of his relationship with Lord Krishna. There's this important teaching, really important teaching from Lord Chaitanya, that says not only the soul is within the heart of every living being, but within the heart of the soul is knowledge and love for Krishna. It's there, it's just dormant, and it just needs to be awakened. Like a seed has life, but it has to sprout. There's a way to sprout a seed, and there's a way to awaken knowledge. That's through sound. That's the Vedic process. Sound, shabda. This is our last slide. Yay! There's Lord Chaitanya on the right, and there's Sanatan Goswami on the left, but Bhaktivinoda is placing himself right at Lord Chaitanya's feet. O Lord, only by taking shelter of you, Haridas, saying, can the soul avoid bad association? I do not see any other way than taking shelter of your lotus feet. Bhaktivinoda, who takes shelter of Haridas's feet, again and again sings this Harinama Chintamani. That's the end of the chapter, chapter 3. Here's the book we brought some years ago. I knew I'd be teaching this, so I bought a supply. 30 or something copies were purchased ahead of time. They were sent to Paramarupa's home. Some of them are on the, if you're interested, you can, go through the book and read some of this a little more slowly than I did. It won't have all the visuals, but the teaching is there of how to become free from the clouds of ignorance and the mist. No, the mist of ignorance and the clouds of offense, or anarthas, unwanted things in the heart that arise from offense. The human form of life is awarded very rarely. This is an important kind of background idea. Other forms of life can't sit and have discussion like this. While I was speaking, there was a rabbit that came running across the yard, checking us out. I was checking him out, and you can't invite the rabbits in the neighborhood to come have a discussion on chanting of the holy name or self-realization, or the person over there on his porch went out with his cat for a while and went back into the house. So you can't bring the cats in the neighborhood and the dogs in the neighborhood, and add the lower life form, lower than the human life form. This is not suited for self-realization. Human life form is suited for self-realization. And if it's not used for self-realization, it amounts to just a polished form of the same thing that other life forms do. That's the teaching of the Vedas. Eating, sleeping, mating, defending, death. Then another birth and do the same thing again. So, to end the cycle of birth and death and to really utilize what the human form of life has given to us, we do those things, but we do them in such a way that through knowledge, consciousness is elevated and we can gradually understand who we are. That's our mission. Over on this side is birth, over on that side is death, and in between is what we do with our life. And the in-between part needs to have what we're doing right now, trying to understand what the mission is and how to overcome the obstacles for that mission. And the teaching that we're getting, in short, is the chanting of the holy name done properly, with Sambandha again, understanding the relationship of those chairs over there with the source of chairs, with the house and the source of all the ingredients that put the house together, the intelligence that figured it out, and etc., etc. The mission of life is not just to be comfortable and do the essential bodily needs in a polished way. It's do those things, that's fine. And don't forget to elevate consciousness. And when consciousness is elevated properly, then there's a much, much greater happiness that enters within. And when that greater happiness enters within, then a lesser attentiveness to all the temporary fleeting things. We attend to the temporary things, but it doesn't end there. It's just part of what we do while we have a body and a mind. We deal with temporary things, keeping our attention on the ultimate goal and how to get there. So that's what this book is, specifically focused on the means for achieving that in this age, which is the chanting of the holy name. So it's a nice text, very, pretty skinny, and it's got it's the roadmap how to get there, how to get to that stage of connecting with who we really are and connecting with Krishna. So let's see if there's some discussion. Gosh, it's 8 o'clock already. Now, I don't know if the technology is working such that our online people can send in questions. They can. Okay. So we'll start with the people assembled here. No mosquitoes. I was expecting when the sun set we'd get some bugs or something, but we didn't. You got some bugs? Oh, you're just waving your hand. You wanted to say something. Okay, go and give her the microphone.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So, I have only one question this time.
You have one question?
Yeah, so far.
So far.
So, you were talking about how just by reading Srimad Bhagavatam and by chanting, we can go back to Godhead.
No, you have to listen very attentively, not just by. Okay?
Very attentively.
Very attentively,
Okay.
right.
We can go back to Godhead.
Yes.
And no matter what.
No matter what.
And we can just chant the name of Krishna right when we are dying, and we're going to go back to Godhead, right?
Well, generally, there can be exceptions. But that's generally a fact. Now, what's your question? You going to chant Hare Krishna when you're at the time of death, or you don't know for sure?
I'll try to.
Yeah, that's a good answer. You don't know for sure, though.
Yeah.
So now, what's your question?
So, that was my question.
It's uncertain.
So, we don't have to.
There's a microphone. Speak into the microphone.
So we don't have to go back to Godhead.
You don't have to do anything.
When we
You just, we know you very well. You don't have to do anything. You have free will. And you like exercising your free will. So you don't have to do anything. But we're making choices. That's what free will is doing. Now, so one should not think, well, when that time comes, I'll call Krishna's name and I'll go to the good place. No guarantee. No guarantee. So then we cultivate that consciousness during this lifetime so that when that moment comes, I'm there. Because the heart is there. I want to be with Krishna. The heart's orientation is going to determine what you're going to think of at the moment of death. Just like a Jamila, he was thinking of his son, because that's what he was attached to. So he thought of his son and he called his name. So what you're attached to is what you're going to think of. Okay?
Yes, thank you.
Hare Krishna. Over here? Someone better run the microphone. You're going to have to come forward a little bit. A little bit. That's as far as it reaches. Okay.
Hello?
Yeah, you're on.
Okay. So my question is, how can we know if somebody has gone to Godhead or not?
Well, on the authority of Scripture, we can know anything. Without the authority of Scripture, we're not going to know anything. So what does Scripture say about that question? How do we know if someone has gone? When their life is focused without exception on pure service, loving service, that's where they go. I mean, there's a verse in Bhagavad Gita, you may know that verse, Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam chajat ante, at the end, kalevaram. Kalevara is like a strong word. That's where you go. Whatever the mind is fixed on at the time of death, that's where you go. So how do you know? If someone has lived, if someone has lived their whole life fixed, that's where they go. So we practice so that the mind becomes fixed, so that's where we go. And it's not something cosmetic. It's something that's part of someone's character. And we can understand character by symptoms also. What they say and what they do, and the quality with which they say and do. So someone who has lived their life is singularly focused on service to God. However whatever the tradition of service to God looks like. Someone who's lived their life that way with squeaky clean. The symptoms of the lower modes of nature are absent. Anger is gone, lust is gone, greed is gone, truthfulness is prominent, austerity, simplicity, etc., etc. By symptoms one can know. It's not just cosmetic, it's inside. Then that's where that person is going. By Scripture we can know. Now in the case of Dundukari, Vaikuntha Vimana descended, everybody saw, so they kind of knew that way too. But that's not how it usually happens. So another way of asking the question is, how do we know that? What can we do? No, not what can we do. How will we know when we're going back to Godhead or to the spiritual realm? How can we prepare our lives for that? So, that's what Bhagavad Gita is teaching us, and further, the Bhagavatam is teaching us. Exclusive devotion. No other shelter. Bhajate mam ananya bhak. Bhagavad Gita. Ananya. No other. One shelter. Now, one shelter doesn't mean I don't care about other people and other things, but while you're interacting with other people and other things, there's one shelter. And that's part of your service to Krishna, is interacting with people and things. with that shelter as your support. Okay? Anything else? Button.
My question is that if a human being renders all his responsibilities on this earth, say towards his parents, towards his family, towards his work, but he doesn't chant the name of the Lord ever, when he dies, is he passing away as a good soul or a bad soul?
Good soul. And they'll go to a good place. But a good place isn't the same as back to Godhead. A good place is a heavenly destination. You do your duties or dharma according to the codes of Scripture properly with faith and and so forth. That good urdvam gacchanti sattvasta. Sattvasta. You go up. Adho gacchanti tamasa. Down. Madhye tishtanti rajasa. You stay in Boston. Or, Bhuloka. Middle planetary system. But that's different. It's not part of your question, but that's different than the spiritual world. The spiritual world is not temporary. And to connect with the eternal, you have to go down the eternal path, not just the goodness path. So it doesn't mean if I'm going down the eternal path, I don't care about goodness. You live your life in goodness, but those goodness activities are dedicated with one shelter, one purpose: satisfying Krishna. That's love. And when you have love, you call the name of the person you love. Not sometimes, lots.
Maharaj, you were talking about Sambandha Gyan, Abhidheya Gyan, and Prayojana Gyan.
The three, yeah.
So is it that it's like a stage, or like one leads to the next to the other,
Yes.
or it's all mixed up?
One leads to the other, leads to the other. Now, it's not entirely linear, but they are sequential.
Linear but not sequential.
Well, let's say you've been practicing the devotional practices for how long now?
Almost 20 years.
Almost 20 years. So in the course of those 20 years, is your understanding of Sambandha Gyan 100% perfect? No. So it's evolving. It's sequential. And as that becomes stronger, the practice becomes more refined. And as the practice becomes more refined, the proximity towards the goal becomes more complete. So it's sequential but not linear. Or unidirectional or something like that.
Similarly, for different Namabhas, can we call them stages?
Yes.
And
Or a better word than stages is aspects. Just like, so here's the big body of the Vedas, the Vedic wisdom. And it has different aspects or features.
And I also feel that one may be chanting in one kind of Namabhas one point,
Yeah.
and it's like all
Yes.
cyclical or a sine wave kind of a thing going up and
Yes,
down.
it's a sine wave kind of thing.
And is it important for us to know while chanting what kind of
But it's important to be mindful when you're doing anything, including chanting. It will say the opposite. If you're distracted and you're not mindful, you better not get in the car and have you the driver if you're that mindful. You got to be mindful when you're doing something. When you're cooking, you got to be mindful what you're doing. If you're not, you can mess up. So when you perform your duties, Mama Nusmara Yudhyacha, you perform prescribed duties and always think of Krishna. So that's the deeper part, where the heart connected with Krishna, and you're mindful of what you're doing in your duties.
I'm almost fearing that when tomorrow morning I'm chanting, I'll be thinking which
Namabhasa category am I in at the moment? Therefore, the knowledge is it can go to the head or it can go to the heart. And the most effective is, of course, just sorting out what's what, this type, that type, what's the terminology, how does it apply, and all that. There's a certain amount of intellectualization, but it really stops there unless it goes to the heart. So when it goes to the heart, that means when you do get distracted, you'll come to understand this is the type, and here's what I need to do. You go back to, the heart. So the essence is the heart's connection with the personality of Godhead, and then there are varieties of distractions. Like driving a car. And there are different ways you can be distracted when driving a car, but it can be very dangerous if you're distracted. So if you find yourself, nodding out, that's really dangerous. Or if you find yourself watching the road and talking to the person next to you, it's another thing. Anyway, so there's different categories of distracted driving. There's different categories of distracted chanting. And some are more serious. And so in some of these we're hearing exactly the conception of what the name is that you're chanting. Ignorance as opposed to knowledge. Thinking of the name is just it's a nice thing. It's a karma kanda ritual that makes me clean from sin, and that's it. It's not really Krishna. If you start to think, no, it's really Krishna. Again, like the question this afternoon, I'm bringing myself back to the center of the road in attentiveness while driving, while chanting, with faith in the words of the scripture that says, this is my time with Krishna. It's like very, very sacred time. So then it takes care of the distracted, different categories of distraction. Vishaka, are you distracted?
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay. You want to say something, Vishaka? No, okay. No? Something? Okay. Go ahead.
I have a couple of questions. So Namabhasa chanting is better than offensive chanting.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. It's called the clearing stage.
The clearing stage. Now, one of the categories of the Namabhasa chanting was Helena, which is inattentive chanting. So, isn't that in the category of offensive?
It depends if it's with faith or not. With faith, then I want to become free from that distraction, but I'm not, because I'm distracted.
So the key point is that there is some degree of striving even within the...
And what striving is resting upon is faith.
Okay.
I mean, Radha's been asking this every time we have a class on this. So there's faith, but she's very honest about she's distracted. But there's faith, and she wants to get beyond that distracted, at least a little bit. And so that's not the same as offense. Aparad is not the same as clearing from that distraction. Okay?
One more.
Yeah.
So in the 6.1.15 purport where Srila Prabhupada quotes Srila Jiva Goswami on the various categories,
Correct. Yeah.
the Santata and
Yes, yes.
Kadachiki. So in that category, there is a completely different nomenclature that is used. I mean, one of them seems like in the Namabhas, like the Abhas Rupa. Is my understanding correct? That's the, Namabhas stage of chanting. There are three.
I remember I don't remember the exact Sanskrit, but I do remember there's a very unusual terminology that we're not accustomed to hearing.
Mm-hmm.
So what your question is what?
What is the overlap between that description and the Namabhas description that we are hearing?
How about you and I sit with the Bhagavatam in front of us and we'll go through it?
Okay.
Because it's probably like 301 for the 101 class.
Okay. Okay. Nice. Okay. Thank you. Oh, there are some online questions that
Okay,
are
go ahead.
Question from Vasanta Prabhu. Namabhas chanting is encouraging. While chanting or before, how can we meditate that we are trying to develop Sambandha Gyan? Oh, this is from Vajeshwari Pran.
Okay, well, the how-to question, I have a standard answer these days. The standard answer is Sadhu Sangha. That's how-to. Then you unpack Sadhu Sangha. You hear from qualified devotees, you read the scripture, and you get knowledge instead of ignorance. Knowledge displaces ignorance. Vidya displaces avidya. So you continue to immerse yourself in knowledge, and then you get an understanding of what's what, and then you can you have the service ahead of you to apply the what's what properly. You just keep striving at it. It's back to what you noticed, the effort to overcome what I've been accustomed to, that is not knowing what's what. That's my service. That's the task in front of me, the task at hand. So just continue to make effort in the association of sadhus, and with the faith that will help you get to where you want to go. Sadhu Sangha is how to.
Next question from Uttam Bhakta Prabhu. Desire to have a relationship with Lord Krishna is fundamental to other stages of chanting.
Yeah.
Is that a correct understanding?
Yes. Now it can be lesser or greater degree, but it's a fundamental one. Okay. Anything else? You have? No. I'd like a little feedback. And the feedback I'd like it from you that are hosting us and the friends of the family here. I'm going to be here for a few more days, and I want to know if this is a relevant topic for persons that may not know all about this chanting and Namabhasa, this type and that type, and I mean, maybe I should have another topic, is what I'm thinking. Is it relevant or, not so relevant? You don't need to tell me right now. But, you can tell Paramarupa and his wife. And, because I want to decide if I want to keep with this. I like the topic. But if it's not relatable, then we'll take another topic. Okay, thank you. Srila Prabhupada.